42nd chapter. And we'll read a couple verses, but it's really the life of Joseph and how he learns love. What is love really? Is it an emotion? Or is it an affection for something or attraction to someone? How do you define love? Does it mean to delight in being with someone? You remember those songs in our early years anyway? Love makes the world go round, and all we need is love, 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 sweet love. It's kind of not natural for us to love folks that treat us wrong, or mean to us, or are unlovable, or hard to love, or make it hard for us to love them. And we've all encountered some folks like that. We all have some folks who maybe has done us wrong or said something, but the Bible encourages us to learn to love them and to care for them. Not that you have to have a emotional type affection for them, but that you love them and that you wish for them the best in their lives. And I think we can learn something from that from the life of Joseph. So in this 42nd chapter, look at verse 7, and then we're going to look at verse 24. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but he made himself strange to them, and spake roughly unto them, and he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And then in verse 24, and he turned himself about from them, and wept, and returned to them again, and communed with them, and took from them Simon, and bound him before their eyes. Joseph was one, and Jeff, you spoke on Joseph some on Sunday night as we was talking about something. Was born in Padanaram. He was the first son of Jacob and Rachel. At the death of his mother, Joseph experienced about 10 years with his father. During that time, he sort of became the errand boy. He would be the one that would run the messages back and forth to his other brothers who were older than him. And these older brothers, sons of Jacob, were working out in the fields, and he'd take something out to the shepherds, let them know, bring the message back to his dad, and back and forth between them and his dad. He was kind of, well, he was one that was, we might say, was a tattleteller. You ever tattletale on somebody? The Bible says he took back evil message back to them, to his dad. Belly sounded like you were the tattleteller. Somebody tattletold on you a lot. But anyway, he took that evil message back to them, and that sort of started the trouble in the family. These brothers didn't like him taking that evil report back to him. That's found in Genesis 37:2, to his father. And his brothers began to have contempt for him. They didn't like him. And it grew worse when Jacob showed his partiality toward Joseph. He had this coat of many colors made. It was obvious that it was a big coat. It was a bright coat. It was something that set him aside from everybody else. And that just kind of fanned the flames. When somebody gets mad at you and something else happens, it just gets hotter and hotter and worse and worse. And in your mind, you just thinking all kind of things. So the discontent between Joseph and his brothers just continued to grow. And then Joseph did something else. He had some dreams. And in those dreams, he saw himself as the chief personality, the big man of the family. that he was over all of his brothers. And he must have didn't have good sense enough to keep his dreams to himself, must have told them. You know, sometimes you dream stuff, you just shut your mouth. Some things you just don't say. You think them, you think they're right, you know they're right, but just don't say everything you know. But he must have gone back and told his brothers, I'm going to be over all of y'all one day. Well, that just made it even worse than it had been before. So this hatred in their hearts caused them to do something pretty bad. Y'all know the story, I think, but they took him off and they sold him off, and he headed down to Egypt to be sold into slavery in Egypt. And I guess if you had always been the favored one in the family, you'd gotten the coat of many colors, and you probably had the best meals, and you'd seen Daddy just pat this one on the head all the time. And suddenly you were sold off and you were headed somewhere else. I suppose Joseph probably developed a pretty big hatred for his older brothers. I think I would be pretty mad about that, wouldn't you? That your brothers turned on you and just throwed you in a pit and sold you off, wanting to get rid of you. So he's probably pretty frustrated, and the hatred probably grew. And then things went from bad to worse. He went down to Egypt and he went to work for somebody. And what happened there? He was accused of trying to seduce the wife of his employer. He was thrown in prison. I mean, it just gets worse and worse. And you know, he's blaming his brothers. I wouldn't be in this prison if they hadn't sold me off, and I'm down here. But life has a way of, God has a way, not life. God has a way of using all the things that happen in your life to prepare you for the rest of your life. You have gone through some bad things. All of you have gone through some bad things, some horrible things, some tough things, some things you wish hadn't happened. You've had folks do you wrong. But Joseph, in all this, had some time for his character to develop. He was in prison. No doubt while he's in prison, he must have prayed a lot. We hear a lot about prison conversions. There's some time to think in prison. There's some time when you're there alone and you really have to do some deep thinking. His character developed there as he prayed to God, and he kept doing he knew who he was. He knew his faith in God. He knew where he'd come from, and it grew rather than fading away. So when the time that God had him ready, God had the circumstances ready, things began to change for Joseph. So if you're in the midst of a hard time, a difficult time, a time that you just don't think can get any worse, be aware and hope and know that God's fixing to change your situation. There's something coming out of all that you've gone through. God has a plan for your life. So what began to happen in his life then? In prison, he came into contact with his jailer, and he began to prove himself to him. And he was soon put in charge of other prisoners. He did what he's supposed to. He lived right. He did the things he's supposed to. And I just made me think of this lady you've seen on TV in the last few days who spent 21 years in jail, and she got out and she's changed her life, and she's telling her story. Joseph was in that situation. He'd been in jail. He'd been in a hard problem, but he got in favor with the jailer. And when God had the time right, what happened? Pharaoh had some dreams. And this jailer put Joseph in touch with Pharaoh, the mightiest man in the country. And he says, I understand you can interpret dreams. And in verse 41, verse 16, I think he says something like, Let's see what he says here. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of his peace." So he told Pharaoh that God had an answer for his dreams, for the things that were keeping him up all night. You know, I think some of the dream, but it was that the cows were getting eaten and the crops were gone, and he told him that God said there was going to be some good years, but there were going to be some hard years, and they needed to put something back, which is good advice for all of us, is it not? There are going to be some hard times. You know, ours may not be all the crops, Dale, but you know the washing machine's going to quit sometime. The car's going to quit running. The house is going to need a roof. Something's going to happen when you need to take care and have some provision and put some back so that you can meet the things that you need to do. So Joseph was put in charge of all that. So they stored the things, and the famine did come. Not only did it come to them, but it came to other lands around there as well. And here comes Joseph's brothers sent down to Egypt to find food so that their family wouldn't starve. And they show up here in this chapter. They come to buy food, and they come into this Joseph, who's the governor of all the land. He's the one looking after all the silos and all the bins, all the things that have been stored. And I believe it, if I'm correct, it's been about 21 years since they'd seen their brother. They didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And the Bible says in that verse that he talked rough to them. They bowed themselves down to him, and they lowered him. The dream he had had as a young boy had come true. That he was over them. They didn't even know it. They were asking for help from him. Can we have some help? Can you keep us from starving? Can you do something? Now, what is the normal human reaction to that? You sold me in slavery. You tried to kill me. You didn't like me. You hated me. You sent me away from my home. I'm not going to give you anything. In fact, guards come take them and put them in jail. Let them get a little taste of what I've had. Let them worry about their lives for a little bit. Let's see them get through a period like I had to get through. But that's not what happened, was it? What did it say he did? In verse 24, and he turned himself about from them and wept. His heart was broken that his brothers had done that. But he hated to see his brothers in that kind of situation. Now, we've all had some things, maybe with your brothers and sisters, maybe with your children, maybe with your parents, maybe with aunts or uncles, when somebody's done us wrong, and then the tide turns and they need our help. How do we do? Are we gonna get vengeance? Are we gonna return the hatred? Are we gonna return the bad things that happened to them? Or can we learn from Joseph that we need to learn to love in spite of all the things that have gone on before? Boy, isn't that a lesson that our nation needs to learn right now? Isn't it a lesson we need to learn? All the things that happen around us, and we see in the newspaper, we see on TV, of somebody shooting somebody that did them wrong, breaking into some house, doing something. This is one of the greatest stories in the Bible. To see somebody that can turn their hatred, their anger, their misfortune into love. And it's what Jesus really wants us to learn. That we love our neighbor. Loving those who are hard to love is a difficult thing. It's one of the things that we try to do, we work at. It's one of the most difficult experiences you can have. It's one of those things that can ruin your life. if you don't learn how to. You can have that vengeance and that hatred, and it will control who you are forever. And you know there are folks who can tell you that their families have been split apart over hatred of brothers and sisters or somebody else. We learn to forgive. Now, we can't make them love us. We can't stop them from hating. We can't stop them from having to try to do vengeance to us, but we can certainly stop ourselves from hating them and turn our hate into love. So it's one of those teachable stories in the Bible. One of the lessons that everybody on the face of the earth needs to learn. If we do that, we'd have a whole lot less wars. If we do that, we'd have a whole lot better government. If we do that, we'd have a whole lot better families and communities and neighborhoods. Because we all know somebody that's been in that situation. And the Bible tells us that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So those that have done you wrong, we need to learn to love them. Some of those horrible things I've experienced is to see some families through the years, not here, but in some other places, when folks would break up a family over 10 or 15 or 20 feet on the property line. Or they'd get mad over some dishes when somebody died. They'd just raise Cain, cuss each other out on the front porch over dividing up something over a death. Just my best advice to you, if you get into those situations, let them have the dishes. Don't worry about a little plot of land. Don't do things that will destroy the relationship forever. Be the bigger person. Just forgive them and go on and be the Joseph in the story. Be the one that says it's okay. I don't need the teacups. I don't need the property. I don't need whatever. And sometimes it may be big amounts. But you know what? You will be the better person for having let that go. So learn to love those folks that will do you wrong, have done you wrong, and are probably going to do you wrong in the future. Because you're going to meet some of these situations as you go through life. And I pray that you'll be the Joseph of the situation. That you'll show mercy and grace and love to them in those times. Let's pray together. Father God, these times that Joseph faced are very real to all of us. There are times in our lives when we feel like we've been wronged, things have come short, and things didn't work out like they should. Help us to learn to love like you love. While we are yet sinners, you loved us, and those around us we need to learn to love as well. Give us big hearts. Give us big arms to forgive and to hug and to restore. Help us to do good and kind and noble things to those of us who have harmed us in some way. Father, help us in the midst of the deep and dark hours of our life, in the midst of the chains and the jails and the dark places that we know that you're still working in our lives. Don't help us to never give up. Help us to keep our character and to grow in your knowledge and your grace and who you are. Help us use those times to find your face and know your mind and be the person that you called us to be. For we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.